high-level consultants who look at complex organizational design and organizational development questions. Brent and I happen to be the duo of experts on organization design. We also teach organization design masterclasses. So what we all wanted to offer to you today is a look at, with the crisis as it stands today, what is your most effective organization design toolkit? That's the question we have. What we would offer to you is, we're going to start with analysis, because any good analysis is the first piece of an organization design. So, thank you for attending with us. When Brent and I teach, we like to usually start with a visual that sort of sets the tone for what's the feeling and the thought, something that's evocative. And when you look at this, I'm sure some of you would raise your hands and go, hey, I recognize that. This is a painting. It's actually here in New York City. It's a Jackson Pollock painting. He did spatter painting. And he's always a good painter to start with if you want to ask the question, is this actually art? Or is this something else that needs to be fixed? And that's a question we like to direct to the topic of chaos. Chaos is a wonderful thing in an organization that you observe and you ask, is this art? Is this something we need? Or is this something that needs to be fixed? Chaos is a fantastic indicator to measure and look at when you are looking at, does my organization work well or not? Now, typically in a one-on-one discussion, we would now ask you to think about, what is chaos in your organization? And I would think that each of you are individually raising your hands going, oh yeah, last Tuesday, that problem we had with. You all know what chaos is. Do you look at that chaos for the value that it gives you? There is a lot of value in chaos.
One of the things that we realize about chaos is the surface disruption caused by change. When change is happening in an organization, chaos usually ensues very soon after. Chaos and disruption really are those impetus for an organization to change. Right now, we're in a very chaotic environment, as you know, and the speed of change is changing ever faster. What was true last week is not true this week. What is the truth that is going to be next week? What is the known unknown that is coming at us? So when we talk about chaos, it's not always negative. It's not always positive. They kind of share the same space. It's the yin and yang of disruption. There is positive and negative in any chaos. Right now in this chaotic situation, a lot of organizations and a lot of governments are realizing that they have a lot of work to do to be prepared for an emergency or a situation at this level. So there is something to be learned out of it. And that's really where we want to take organization design. Can the design be built and able to be agile and adaptable, as opposed to structured and immovable?
So, I like this visual. This is what I look like most mornings by 10 a.m. Most of us by 10 a.m. have had at least 3 crises come up. And I looked specifically at this title for you to consider, under current conditions. There's always chaos in an organization. All organizations have something that look like that Jackson Pollock painting. But under current conditions, life is very different. We've been specifically working with some clients who will come back to us and say, oh, I'm having severe management problems with this person, that person. People who we coach are under incredible stress with unhappy and reactive staff. And we've gone over to saying to them, don't worry about it. Don't stress about finding a good, real, solid answer for that problem, because that's under current conditions and things are going to change by next week. If you're looking at doing an organizational analysis, you've got two layers here. You've got that beginning Jackson Pollock layer, and you've got this undercurrent conditions layer of things changing ever more rapidly, not being true from one to the next. And as an organizational design expert, you need to be able to discern those two lenses of chaos going on. We are under current conditions, and that phrase is going to repeat over and over and over.
So let's talk briefly about ingredients for good analysis. I'm sure everyone has done an analysis prior to an organization design engagement or during it. One of the things that we realize currently is that the analysis that we're doing is shifting and changing. Mostly the data that is available. The data is aging quicker. It used to be when you had data, you could rely on that data for a period of time before you needed to refresh the data. Now the refresh period is coming faster and faster. Most people's strategic plans that were in place and that they were driving and aiming towards with their goals and targets are shifting and moving quicker and quicker in organizations. So during the analysis phase, you have to look at things differently in the current environment.
Now, this slide may look basic to you. We are going to say that if you actually look at these data indicators on the left on the slide, what they meant in January 2020 and what they mean right now is fundamentally different. Let me give you some examples. Back in January, missed deadlines may have been a very valuable data indicator, an indicator that processes were structured wrong. Today, if I look at this, the most critical and the most highly changing is probably your strategic plan, your client feedback, and your market competition. Back in January, those were static. They were fixed. They were things that you set every 6 months. Under current conditions, that may now be every month that those are changing. Now, I really like this simple diagram, even though it's very, very simple. It visualizes something when you are trying to talk to your senior leadership about that chaos that's going on. And it's a fundamental understanding of where your problems are coming from. The outside risks and disruption, everyone is on this Zoom call because of COVID-19. Those are the outside risks and disruptions that are constant for all of us. The type of work is very different. Let's take, for an example here, Amazon. The type of work that they do has been exploding during this crisis. Last statistic I read, Amazon was earning £8,000 a minute. That's a pretty staggering sum. So what they're dealing with from these outside risks and disruptions is very different than, say, the oil and gas sector. Now let's add to that your unique office. With a company like Amazon, you're looking at globally different labor laws. You're looking at labor disruption. You're looking at trying to hire. What's in that intersection in the middle is what you can reasonably try and solve.
So let's go back to disruption a little bit, and outside risks and disruption. When we think about that, it's been positive for Amazon and for a few other organizations. It's been extremely negative for many organizations, large and small. So there is a bit of positive in COVID-19 happening. Amazon's making a lot of money. The airline industry and the oil industry is pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy or not being able to adapt to the environment in which they're given.
The big thing that this type of model can help you communicate is the decision between what is important chaos to look at that you can fix and what is noise or things outside of your control that you may not like, but you can't deal with now.
So one of the ways in which organizations look at and understand the environment in which they're embedded in and is around and influencing them is something called situational awareness. The term originally came from the fighter pilots during the Korean and Vietnam War and World War II, when pilots had to learn that what was in front of them was not the only thing they needed to worry about. They needed to worry about the entire air environment. Someone could be sneaking up from behind you, from the top, bottom side. So situational awareness was started as a phrase during fighter combat to help them understand you have to be aware of the entire environment. That has then shifted towards organizational awareness, where organizations need to be aware of everything that's happening around them. Internal pressures, internal and external influences, shareholder and stakeholder needs. That is really what's happening. And if you don't take that circular 360-degree view of what's going on to and with the organization, you end up like this poor fisherman being attacked by jaws or a shark from behind. So let's talk about organizational awareness a little bit. Organizational awareness, as on the screen, means having the ability to read the group's emotions, emotional currents, and power relationships and identify influencers or chaos that is happening within and to the organization. So it's very important to have a global, holistic view of what's happening.
So let's hold on this slide, and I'd like you to think back a little bit on the analysis tools that we're putting forward here. Because Brent and I have touched on, you can do analysis like this, you can do analysis like this, look at these data points. We had a question from a client yesterday who was asking, but what level do I measure to? How do I set my metric? Organizational awareness is a hugely important tool, which basically means you know your group, you know its culture, you know its dynamics. So you can go through all of these analysis steps that we put out, but unless you're smart about how your organization functions, you're going to get eaten by that shark sneaking up behind you. I like that shark. So. I will admit it, I like Hello Kitty. Maybe a little childish, but I think Hello Kitty's cute. Now, I'm going to give a story about a client we're working with, a pharmaceutical client, global pharmaceuticals, and they are having huge challenges at the moment. As you can imagine, pharmaceuticals are essential, whether you are delivering them for the respiratory drugs needed right now to treat COVID-19, or if you're trying to keep your supply lines open so that cancer patients don't die unnecessarily as a side effect of this. So pharmaceutical companies have gone to home office operations, and they are attempting to deliver at the same level or more than they would under normal operations. Our client with this company is what's called a medical director. So he's the highest medical person in the organization. Short version of this story, he is ready to kill his boss. Now, why is that? His boss came up under structured, non-digital, hierarchical command organizations. Those were the characteristics and the structures that promoted you to a managing director at the time he came up. And this man's mantra is, our work is the same as it ever was. We're doing exactly the same thing. Nothing has changed. You must work as you've always done. And our client is going, I'm going to kill him. I am going to kill him because we are different. If you look at these two images of Hello Kitty, they are small differences, but they are significant differences. And the answer for all of us as we try to adapt our organizations to this change is things are not the same as they always were. We are different. Fundamentally attempting to communicate in the way that we do, via Zoom, via video chat, via written communication, is causing significant problems in how we deliver. And if you are persistent that you believe nothing has changed because we're just working from home office, you've failed to understand the basic fundamental change in the marketplace for all of us as we go forward.
One of the challenges we keep hearing from many of our clients is they wonder when they are going to return to January. When will it go back to the way it used to be? And we are counseling them on, you are not going back to the way it used to be. You need to look at what the future is going to be. And that is a difficult thing for people to grasp right now. But as Heidi said, they want to continue to work as they've always worked, even though the environment has completely changed and the work model has changed, which we believe that organization design is going to be a key factor into the future of how organizations are structured and how are they designed to be agile and be able to adapt to whatever keeps coming at them. And it keeps coming faster and faster.
So we have clients, we have some clients who are stuck on, it's the same as it ever was. Our sad message is to clients, not only will this not go back to January 2020, it is also, there is not just one change in front of you, but most likely you will need to change and restructure your teams probably 3 times between now and December. Now that's a little metric you should all stop and think about. I may have to change my organization 3 times between now and December. One of the mottos at Orgology is the only person who really likes change is a wet baby. I say that because getting a change to happen under normal circumstances is hard. I'd like you to think about, you need to get your organization to change 3 times between now and December. That is a reasonable estimate when you consider reemergence of the virus, changes in travel options, changes in the marketplace. That is a fully reasonable estimate. So we don't just go to our clients and tell them things that make them unhappy and cry. We try to give them a way to look forward. So we look to our clients and say to them, here's the process. Here's what we'd like you to think about. So we take our clients through these steps. We take our clients through an evaluate step. And the really key question there is, how has your strategy fundamentally changed? Based on those fundamental changes, let's create a couple of scenarios. We send them off with those scenarios to get more information and assess the impact. What is that going to mean with shop stewards, with work councils, with unions, with HR, with finance? They come back with that additional information and look at those scenarios again, and they create a hybrid. After they create that hybrid of the best option, they then create a deployment team with the message of how long are we going to operate like this? What does it look like? You set the communications and you deploy it. And then you go into, did it work? Measure, change, repeat. Now I go through this and I expect that everyone listening to this is going to look at this process and they're going to tilt their head to the side and they're maybe going to squint their eyes a bit and go, that looks familiar. That seems familiar. And what this process is fast track organizational design. That's what we're proposing to our clients, fast, dirty organization redesign.
We're not going to spend too much time on design principles and design metrics. One of the things that we try to instill in almost every client, and it's sometimes quite difficult, is that they have to come up with design principles. What do they want and how do they want it? What is it that they're trying to achieve with the redesign or restructure or reorganization, whatever phrase you'd like to use. But to have design metrics associated with each of those is extremely important. How are you going to measure success that you've gotten there? And this is one of the more difficult things to get people to actually see and do, is to define an outcome that would measure success.
I always look at these. I'm assuming some of you on the phone have been to small medieval cities like Prague or Florence, Italy. I always think of the design principles as a navigation aid. If you've been in Florence or in Prague, you know you never have any idea what street you're on, but you look up at the horizon and you find a church spire. And you look at that church spire and you go, I need to be to the left of that. So then you walk to the left of that and it vaguely gets you where you want to go. And we discuss this always with clients. Put it as something that will help you navigate yourself and return to. Now, there were, as we look on and reflect over what this crisis has bubbled up on problems, and I think all of us have seen a lot of problems surfacing through this. If we have to, in a fast track way, tell our clients, these are the three top ideas. The three top ideas we tell them are design principles, and then these two others. Span of control is a very unloved idea. It's not modern, it's not sexy, it doesn't seem innovative. But we think it's an essential aspect to consider as you're doing some level of fast track redesign. And this is why. Across all of our clients, the biggest challenges we've seen repeated over and over relate to communications, leadership, and time wasting. There are too many touch points, And people are trying to use in-office analog approaches to work coordination. And our suspicion is it's because a span of control is set for in-office operations and not at-home operations. So when you are reassessing the structure of your team, you need to be looking at span of control. Sure, you can give people management training, you can give them leadership training. Essentially, though, you have to create an environment where their skills will work, and that involves looking at the span of control. We would also recommend that you maybe scribble out in that headline span of control and write in span of autonomy. Think about it from that perspective. How can we structure our work better so that people have a span of autonomy and aren't wasting their time trying to coordinate in ways that are not suited to the under current conditions environment?
I'm sure some of you have seen online where people are doing Zoom conferences and they have 100, 150 people in a Zoom meeting, which when looked at from the outside, it's just an enormous amount of resources being spent on something that isn't necessarily productive. So with span of influence and span of control, you can modify how organizations function in this new reality that they under current conditions.
Now, if span of control is not sexy, the sexiest term in organization design over the last 10 years has been digitalization. And this is a really interesting one to rethink under current conditions. We have not shifted in an organic way to a work from home culture. It's not a culture where Susan is working from her home office because she has a dentist appointment today. We have suddenly, with no preparation, taken the entire organization and sent them home. And on top of that, we've done it at a period of high stress with little support. There is only so much support you're going to get from having Slack. Slack is nice. Slack is not an office place culture. So what you're seeing, even with Silicon Valley, we're digital, Google, and all of the startups out there, is they considered themselves digital organizations, but they never considered what does it mean to be an office culture, to conduct HR, and to have all of your relationships in a digital and social media environment. And the answer to that is we didn't think about it. We never assumed from the get-go for most organizations that we would be purely remote and digital under reduced circumstances. In the United States, and this may be particularly peculiar to the United States, some of the examples of how we didn't think this through are we've had several companies here in the United States lay off hundreds of people on 5-minute Zoom calls. That is a data indicator of we did not think about what it means to be a fully virtual organization. So we would say, when you go back and you're doing your replanning at this point, really consider what digitalization means, not with regard to social media and influencers and clicks and likes, but what does it mean to build a culture and connectivity and be an employer people want to work for under current conditions.
So at this point, we would ask you questions, but I think you are possibly asking us questions on the chat, and we'll get to that in a moment and start answering those questions. One of the things that we have observed with our clients is that there is a challenge of this known unknown. They know that things are coming, but they don't know what they are, and they don't know how to react to them. There is a fear in many organizations about what's going to happen to them, and it's a valid fear. Can organization design help alleviate some of that fear? Absolutely. In our practice in orgology, we're organization design and organizational development. So we have two different layers that we help clients with. Before we get to the questions, we want to make sure that you know you can reach out to us, ask us any questions that we don't possibly get to at this point, or if you have any later. And also the social media person, which is me, said follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, do all those things that social media likes to do. And yes, we are a fully digital organization, and we can function in a digital way. We'll get to questions here in a moment. Let me see if I can get up to them. Stop sharing?
Yeah, I think stop sharing.
Let's see.
Okay, Heidi, do you do this fast and simultaneously? If you do, seems you will be dead before done. Okay, I think the question is when we're talking with our clients about this process, how can we do it quickly, and are we doing them one after another? How does this work? Current client I'm working with at the City of New York as part of the school system, we're doing this within a 30-day time frame. You do it sequentially, you do one step after another. You have to be committed to the momentum that's forced on you. One of the things, because it's a school environment, that I put forward as their motto is getting 70% on the test is success. If you are a C student, yay, C students. You can't go for perfection, you have to go for good enough, which is about 70%. So you can go through a fast design curve like this. It means setting the expectation that it's not going to be perfect.
The next one, fast track org design. Say more about
what this means.
What this means. One of the challenges that organizations have faced continually with organization design is they will do the design work, and then it will take HR a period of time to implement that design. In fast track organization design, we work with the organization to only look at very specific items that are interfering or interacting with their organization at this time. We're not doing a broad look at all elements of design. We're focusing on what they need currently and also pushing HR to make those changes faster than they have in the past. Now, in the US, that's perfectly, they're capable of doing that. In some countries where you have very strong labor laws and workers' unions, it's more difficult to fast track an org design re-engineering of an organization.
What I would say to that, though, is several of the clients we work with in Germany, you also have more options in highly structured labor markets because the state is going to give you support. So maybe your furlough or how the salary is split between a state support and an in-country support is going to be different. So what I would say is different labor market, different options. Question from Erica, do you believe purpose-driven organizations are thriving better through this than those who are not? This is an interesting question. We love purpose-driven organizations.
Let me hit on this a little bit. One of the big challenges that we're seeing within the United States healthcare industry, and it is a for-profit as opposed to many countries, part of the challenge, and they are very purpose-driven as an organization. They are there to help the health and welfare of the public. Their challenge currently is there are less paying customers showing up to hospitals for elective surgeries and appointments, which are how they make their money, as opposed to everybody showing up with COVID-19, where they're not able to actually recoup a lot of the funds and money output that they're doing. So they're very purpose-driven, and they're being impacted significantly by their loss of paying customers. We work with a lot of nonprofits that are very purpose-driven, and they have a different take on what the environment's doing to them.
Now, if you work with Brent and I, you'll know that we often take questions very differently. So I'm going to look at this question from a different perspective, which is, I love mission-driven organizations. And what I have unfortunately discovered is bad leadership and individual poor reactions to stress situations has meant that purpose-driven organizations are not any better than other organizations as I'm seeing it at the moment. I've been seeing poor leadership can fully derail the response. You have to have good leadership, and I think that the key in my answer would be, don't assume because the mission seems purpose-driven that everyone on your team has bought into that mission. That is, unfortunately, a false assumption. So.
Julie.
Jody Goulden, how do organizations design not only for current conditions, but for future conditions when leaders are experiencing so much uncertainty about even the near future? For me, the stake that I put down is, what is our strategic goal for the next 3 months? Which sounds kind of stupid, but that's about as well as you can plan. Is you say, in the next 3 months, in the next 4 months, what can I plan against, and work backwards from there, knowing that your goal is to continue to serve your clients and to maintain your staff. How would you look at that?
In traditional organization design, one of the things that we always drive our clients to is building an organization that is adaptable and agile to the environment that comes. To be able to use a phrase from Chris Worley, is be built to change as organizations are impacted by things like COVID-19 or other internal and external factors. Many organizations are too rigid to be able to adapt. We work with clients in the past to build an organization that is agile. And one of the large global company we work with, they're doing well because they have been able to adjust their manufacturing. They've been able to adjust and modify who's doing what work because of the design that was put in place. So there are opportunities. Currently, those opportunities aren't here because no one's going to go through a large reorganization not knowing what the future is going to be in 3 to 6 months. So we're seeing that we have to shift from large systemic organization change to smaller implementation to adapt to the current environment. And then later on, we hopefully will build a bigger, more sustainable change for them in the organization.
So next question is, Naomi, how are your clients reacting to your idea of span of autonomy? I always love a slightly sarcastic question. That's the New York in me. Mixed reviews.
Yes.
It depends on 2 things. Number 1, their culture and style, and perhaps their legal constraints. But the other question is, how do you sell it to them? And it goes to the change idea of, if the pain is extreme enough, they're going to change. And if you see the money that you are wasting and having 40 people on a Zoom call, and that money is put in front of you, and you're giving an alternate scenario that can make people more effective and happier and save you money, you made your business case.
Alvaro.
Yeah, Alvaro, what is the justification to work together in the same site? I think we are spending too much in rental and infrastructure costs. How can AI help us become more empowered and reduce management layers and increase spans of control? There's Brent and I will both give a different view of that. One of the aspects Brent and I both work with strongly is culture. And I think that even if you talk to the guru of culture, Edgar Schein, his name always slips me, he would say culture is incredibly hard to define. So what we did when we went to emergency operations is we ripped the organization apart and we disrupted culture and unspoken communications. And with any pendulum swing, it goes out and it comes back. And I see more of the questions around what are we wasting by doing in-person meetings is the cost of commuting. The cost of spending 3 hours in a car each day going back and forth to someplace. So I think that there is room to reduce our in-person footprint, but I see a coming back, a swing back that needs to happen because we haven't fully identified all of the culture and disruption that we created. And I personally, from an education background, come from a liberal arts lens and a lens of creativity. And I think that what makes an organization most productive is creativity. I don't care if you're finance or a dance company, creativity. And I don't see space for AI specifically to replace that. I think AI, my opinion, can replace some mechanics and processing, but it's not going to replace the creativity and the dynamic of human interaction.
Yep, I think those are all very true. On the AI part, I think AI can be utilized in ways that we haven't even recognized yet. I think it is still very young in its infancy of use. I think this COVID-19 is helping people realize that there are more opportunities for AI to be utilized in organization design and across organizations to empower them and to help potentially reduce management layers. I don't know that it will reduce management layers since it is fairly new. I think the sharing of sites and resources among organizations is going to be paramount in the future, as in current situations, every organization is suffering and hurting for resources and how can they utilize what they have to their best advantage. So I think it is really, there is going to be a resource sharing in the future in different industries and different organizations. Currently, a great example is the WHO right now, working with all countries, except the US, of course, about finding a vaccine. They're sharing data openly, and that has never happened before. So we're starting to realize that sharing of resources is of a great benefit for the greater good of the customers. And I think that's going to permeate and continue down to the organization level, just not just at the government level, but at the organization level and at the small business level. We're all going to start sharing information and ideals and resources to perform better. We'll
Okay.
take one or two more, and then please reach out to us at info@orgology.com with any additional questions.
Naomi, sorry if the sarcastic comment resonated wrong with you. I found it a charming question. Maybe that's the better statement, because I do think that purpose should make a difference. Being in a purpose-driven organization, it should be better. What I have sadly found is that assumption is not always something I can depend on. Maybe that frames it better. Evan asks, in your work with clients, revising span of control in regards to remote work, are you finding a pattern towards larger or smaller spans of control? I would say, number one, that's dependent on the type of work. My bias is towards project teams. So if you can create clusters that reduce the reporting need, that's the effective way. That would be my view on it.
Yeah, I think currently what we're seeing of it is a lot of people are creating larger meetings and larger use of the resources that are there because they don't know how to utilize their workforce in this current environment. So you'll have people coming into meetings or being invited into meetings and expanding that span of control for no apparent reason other than to keep people busy. And I think over time, organizations will get better at how they manage people. Yes, the span of control should be larger. A supervisor should be able to monitor and manage multiple teams doing multiple different projects, kind of in an agile or waterfall aspect, and that comes to IT and IT implementations and development, where you're doing cascading and you're doing agile development. I think that knowledge is going to get put across span of control and span of influence over time.
And my idea, what I'm suggesting with the project teams, is if you have outcome-based project teams, that leads to a smaller or a larger number of teams being able to be managed by a smaller number of managers. If you really structure as outcome-based teams, there's less double and triple checking. It creates greater efficacy. Hello, Helga. So how have you shifted your thinking? What have you learned that makes you agile and ready to adapt? How do we as consultants have to change? I could say fear is a great motivator. That makes me sound like a really not nice person. But the idea of, but we've always done it like this, it's just, it's not helpful nowadays. And what I see is that all of our work is tactical, process technical. At the same time, it's emotional, hysterical, and hand-holding. People are under stress. People are freaking out. Well, that's an opportunity for change. We can't go back to January. So I see it as kind of managing both sides of that relationship, encouraging the platform you're on not only is burning, it doesn't exist anymore. So we have to move forward.
And I think on the consultant question, consultants have to change. I think organizational development and, organization design as a profession is going to have to adapt to the new norm and help organizations understand where they were and where they're going has to be adaptable to the future. You can't you can't take a stable environment and create a stable environment and expect that not to continue to change. Many of us have been, and I was in the US government for a while, it seemed like they were restructuring and redesigning one after the other, and there was no stop to it because it wasn't thought out and it wasn't done well. So change and design was always put again and again on an organization. I think as design consultants, we need to get away from that and help an organization take the time to do the design correctly so that it can be adaptable and agile for the future. And that is completely possible, and you can design an organization to be flexible and adaptable and agile. It takes more time up front, but it also saves time in the organization in the long run.
Dan Ritter, to implement an organization design, relationship capital is so important at the foundation for building shared understanding. The ability to develop deep relationships seems to be hindered during this crisis. A lot of things going on in our lives, shift to virtual, etc. How do your clients work through this in an environment with multiple fast-track redesigns?
I will tell you the first thing, many of our clients have bailed and said, we don't have time for this. And we've pulled them back and said, if you don't take the time now, when are you going to take the time?
Yes, and if you don't do it now, you won't be in 6 months.
Right.
I agree with you on the emotional relationship capital. I agree completely with you on it. I think that that is a lot of what has been displaced due to this abrupt shift to completely home office. I think that when we are looking at between now and December, it's kind of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're starting with the lowest, most basic. Can we keep people employed? Can we keep delivering to our clients? Can we continue to exist as a company? And that's the lowest on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's not pretty, and it's not where any of us want to be, but it's where we're at right now. And as I'm guiding clients, my conversations with them are, how do I keep my people employed for the next 6 months? That's the ugly question I have to help them answer. And there is no clear line to that. That we are figuring out. So much as I'm really, really worried about what you're talking about, that's a higher level on Maslow's hierarchy than I feel like we can respond to right now. And maybe when we have a little more clarity around this in 6 to 8 months, we can start thinking about that.
I think one of, to go back to the global pharmaceutical, one of the challenges that they did not initially see, and we tried to help enlighten them a bit, is that they may potentially have supply chain disruption. They make pharmaceuticals for cancer patients, a lot of bio meds. They also make sustainment medications for asthma patients and COPD and heart diabetes and heart disease. So as their supply chain, if it does not sustain at the level it needs to sustain, they could potentially have an impact on people's lives. So what they did is they went back and they started looking at how can we help those supply chain customers survive this so that we can get the products we need to get to the patients that need them most. And it becomes, you have to go so far back in your supply chain and see where the beginning of it is, when for years you got to just ignore that sub supplier and not worry about it. But now large global companies are having to go all the way back deep into their supply chain and help their vendors sustain and survive the impact of COVID-19.
So I'm going to step away because I have to actually get on something else, but
I would
these are kind of all disorganized. So if
Sure.
we've missed some of your questions, I apologize. I'm going to step away briefly. Grüße nach Potsdam. War schön, dich wiederzusehen, Helga. And thank you.
Yeah. And if there are any questions that we didn't hit, please feel free to reach out to us, or if there's something you think about later, you can either go to our website, www.orgology.com, and contact us and send it through there, or send it to info@orgology.com. We are more than happy to connect with you. If you're having a challenge with a client and you want to just talk it through, please feel free to reach out to us. We currently have a bit of time, since some of our clients have decided that they don't want to move forward, much as many of you probably are dealing with the same thing. If you're internal, it is difficult to get this across to leadership that they need to change faster to adapt to an unknown that they don't know what it is that's coming. So feel free to reach out to us. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you got something out of this, and follow us on social media. We put out something every day, discussion points and other things. We also have a page on Facebook, which is the Organization Design Learning Lab, where we start conversations about organization design specific subjects, and everybody in the community interacts about that subject. So again, thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, evening, morning, wherever you happen to be. Thank you.